Hampton Roads Business Weekly. I'm Zach Miller.
And I'm Cheryl Tan. This week we continue our look at seasonal businesses.
On paper they sound great. You work for only part of the year, but then you realize you'll only be making income for that part of the year. I recently spoke with Dr. Joe Bucci, a professor at Regent University. We discussed the advantages and disadvantages to owning a seasonal business.
So I'm looking to start a business, and maybe I should open a seasonal business. Okay. What's the benefit of opening a seasonal business?
There are some businesses, some activities that just require more of a focus in that one particular season. It would probably be better to consider long range, calendar year in terms of how your approach is going to be to the business, because even if you're doing something in our area, resort area, during the summer, or the business seems to be active during the summer, you could almost say that every business has seasons.
Sure.
Car business has seasons. There are particular times when things are a little bit more active, but there's also going to be downtimes. So it's planning for the downtimes and also planning for those busy times, and that's certainly,
like any business, it's going to be higher, or
right,
exactly. If it's a restaurant, maybe it's better on the weekends than not.
Right, sure.
If I was going to start a business, and let's say it is a seasonal business, why might I want to start a tourism-related business in a specific time? What would be the benefits for something like that?
If you're thinking about starting a business, you have an interest in our area resorts. You know that there's you can build off what happens around the season here. The benefit is, certainly if it's something that you have familiarity with, you've worked in that field before, you have a comfort level, you can offer something to the customers that's unique, that's different, that's not being offered. If you look at, you probably know this because you've studied entrepreneurship, most of the models that I've seen say that there are very few businesses that are started where something is just completely unique that's never been done before. That's probably 10% of businesses. Most businesses are built off someone sees a gap in service, something's not being offered. In a seasonal business, perhaps they believe that they can offer something that's more attractive, and customers are going to want this particular thing that they're offering. The seasonal challenge is being able to deploy all the resources that you need at that one particular time. And it's going to take a lot of planning, because there is that ramp up, there is maintaining that high level of service during that particular time, and then there's going to be a ramp down, and so it's maintaining, it's financial resources, it's inventory, it's raw material, whatever you're going to need to provide that product or service, and then it's also the ramp down. What am I going to do now that I've committed to this these expenses? I have these employees. Am I going to lay them all off?
How can one really understand? So obviously, with a true seasonal business, a Halloween shop, you know that when October 31st is done, that's the date.
Right.
But let's say it's a different type of industry, but it is seasonal. How can they really track when the season is over?
Well, I don't think you want the season to end. I think we were kind of talking a little bit about a business model that you're familiar with. You want to try and find ways to extend that. I mean, the Halloween shop's a great one. We could brainstorm about that. We know that that's our point. All the films come out that time of the year. And yet, what can we do to continue that? Maybe we can get people to enroll in a newsletter. We can continue to push content to them about, hey, we don't just have this season, but what about doing something, during Thanksgiving or other holidays, or as you're turning into another season? Can we create some space in there where we can continue to keep people interested in our particular business?
So use the brand as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then have different segments or different layers that can help you out with that.
Yeah, I think if you have the brand is the key, right? If you know that people are going to come to you for this particular season, why not build that and try and extend it as long as you can? Because it's certainly going to help you with the income when as you ramp down. You've got people maybe you want to keep. You've got expenses throughout the whole rest of the year. So what kind of creative things can you do? And I think those are the things that we should be challenging people to consider.
Well, and even big companies that we've seen just in our area, we'll use Busch Gardens for example. Spring break. They understand that there's a market there in early April, and then they're open for a little bit on weekends, but then they open, kind of officially Memorial Day. But then, they have the Halloween piece now. So like, okay, we can stay
Sure.
open a little bit
That's
longer.
exactly
There's a
right.
market. The brand is there. Let's keep going throughout the year.
Yeah, I think you have to think year-round in order to be prepared for that season. I don't think you can just sneak up on it. I think if you're doing that, then you're doing a disservice to yourself, and you're not giving your business a chance to really grow and expand some of those other spaces that you could fill.
That's great.
Being an entrepreneur, sometimes you're forced to take a risk. Sarah Baldwin of New Ravenna Mosaics took a risk not long after graduating from college. Now she owns one of the largest businesses on the Eastern Shore. Sarah, you were born and raised on the Eastern Shore, and your business is right now still based on the Eastern Shore. How did you start your company?
Well, I was in grad school at the University of Pennsylvania, and I was studying art. And I became less interested in painting and more interested in doing something that was, creating something that was functional, that was practical. And so instead of painting, I was drawn to making mosaics because they're more useful. And after college and grad school, I needed to find a job, and I pitched this crazy idea to my parents that I would start a mosaic making company, and they were incredibly supportive. I'm not sure I would be as supportive, but they were incredibly supportive, agreed to help me for a year, and gave me free room and board, and I started the company that way.
New Ravenna is your company, and you make beautiful pieces. So
Thank
can you talk about what it is you create and what it is you've created on the Eastern Shore as far as the company and your manufacturing business?
Well, we're proud that we are the largest studio for making handmade mosaics in North America. And now I realize that's a very small niche, you know, handmade mosaics, but there is a big enough market for handmade mosaics to cause us to need to employ about 115 people.
Wow. On the Eastern Shore, that's
On
critical.
the Eastern Shore, yeah, which is a region that really needs industry, and it needs industry like that because manufacturing is a wealth-generating industry for a community. It brings a net cash flow to the community because you're selling your products to people that don't live there, and they send you the money, and then the money goes to all your employees and your vendors. And so it creates wealth instead of sucking it out of the community, which is what happens when you go to Walmart and you buy products and they send the money to China.
You mentioned earlier too that you are a designer, an artist, but then the business part, while the mindset part was there, the logistics of it.
Yes, the practical skills were lacking.
It was a challenge.
Absolutely. I didn't take an accounting class or an economics class or a business management class, so I learned by the school of hard knocks. And it's funny because when I was coming along, it wasn't popular to be an entrepreneur. You know, I have friends that went to Wharton, or I did when I was in grad school, and none of them were studying entrepreneurial management. There were maybe 3 guys studying it in the whole school. Now it's very popular, which is great.
Right. So how'd you overcome that hump?
Oh, so
trial and error?
One of the ways, certainly trial and error, but one of the biggest jump starts I got was after I joined EO, the Entrepreneur Organization. It's a peer group of fellow business owners that end up being like a board of directors. You know, you meet together once a month, give each other advice, you know, tell each other war stories, and you end up learning lots and lots because, you know, it's not just you making the mistakes and learning from them, it's all of you, and, you know, sharing your successes and propping each other up and spurring each other on.
So what's ahead for New Ravenna? Talk about what's happening with the company and anything that we should know about related to the business.
Well, New Ravenna's mission is to market extraordinary surfaces to the world, and we will continue to develop products, make them on the Eastern Shore, market them to the world, and try to stay ahead of design trends nationally and internationally.
And putting the Eastern Shore on the map.
Absolutely.
Sarah Baldwin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Imagine making a decision regarding your business, but not being able to see the results of that decision for 10 years. That's a dilemma Patrick Duffler of the Williamsburg Winery faces every single day, and why he's our Entrepreneur of the Week.
First and foremost, be passionate about what you're doing. Believe in it with every ounce of your being. Share that passion.
Patrick, congratulations on being named Entrepreneur of the Week.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for letting us hang out with you here at the Williamsburg Winery. We've got a beautiful locale here, but in 1983 it was just farmland, and I know that your father turned it into what it is today.
That's correct.
Talk a little bit about that process for him.
It was fun. Father came to this country as a foreign exchange student in the early 60s and fell in love with the United States, became a citizen. And so Mom and Dad looked at Washington State, Virginia, South Africa, and Australia, and settled on a small farm in Williamsburg, Virginia, quote, the one they couldn't afford. It was really fun. We got here, and the weeds were 6 foot tall. There were snakes all over the place. The house didn't have any power. There was no running water. I thought my parents had lost their minds.
Right. It didn't look like this.
It did not look like this, no. But yeah, every year has gotten better, and it's fun. It's been a wonderful experience, a wonderful adventure.
It certainly turned into something quite amazing for your family and for the entire community.
Well, thank
and
you.
so you grew up probably running in the fields.
I did. I arrived here at 11 years old and quickly was enrolled in the local junior high and then high school. Did my undergraduate stint at William & Mary, so I'm a Williamsburger by adoption.
There you go. So you're growing up at a vineyard with restaurants and all of the hustle and bustle around you. Was it automatically known to you that you would take over, that this was your path?
Take over? No, but I was very interested in wine. Like I said, I grew up in Europe, so wine was always a part of the table. I realized that because my parents were putting all of their savings into driving the business, that I had to figure out some way to afford college. So I put myself through William & Mary by giving tours and tastings in the wine shop, and by necessity had to throw away my introversion so I could learn public speaking. And I had a ball. I really, really liked it. And so one thing led to another. I ended up being involved in our wine festivals, our special events on property. Ended up doing an internship in Bordeaux, which was a ball. Spent some time in California taking an MBA level class out there, and then got involved in upper management, and here I am.
You took over from your father in 2011, so 4 years now, and so you've seen, as the head of the company, the challenges of a seasonal business like the winery. What has that been like the last 4 years or so?
Well, fundamentally, you hit upon the seasonality is something that is intrinsic and inherent to the wine business. We are farmers, ultimately. We grow grapes, we make the wine, we bottle it, and everything else that goes on. But fundamentally, it's what Mother Nature does out in the vineyard
Right.
that sets the bench for what's to come. It's a long-term planning business. You can't speed things up. We're making decisions this year for vineyards that will be planted next year that will be yielding fruit 4 or 5 years later that will be made into wine that won't come to market until 10 years after the initial decision. So it's all about the long term.
It really is. It's planning to the nth degree.
Absolutely.
As far as any advice for entrepreneurs, maybe aspiring entrepreneurs or those just trying to grow their company to another level, what kind of advice would you give to them?
First and foremost, be passionate about what you're doing. Believe in it with every ounce of your being. Share that passion with the people that are making things happen internally. Share that passion with the people that are not necessarily part of your organization, but who can then in turn be ambassadors for what it is that you're doing. Try to go back from being in in the trees to seeing the forest and back again quickly. Don't be afraid to take small calculated risks that you can measure and have fun.
There's a lot of wine.
This helps, no doubt about it.
Patrick, thank you very much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome back to Hampton Roads Business Weekly. Starting and building your own business can be difficult even under the best of circumstances. Now imagine doing it while you're homeless. That's the challenge Dennis Gray faced while starting his company. All right, Dennis, you got into business a little bit different a way than maybe other business owners have. How did you get your entrepreneurial journey started?
Okay, I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit, but at one point in time I did work for one of the top pest control companies in New Jersey and learned the business inside out. And due to some life situations, I was relocating to Virginia. And I decided that I developed such a passion for pest control that I would actually bring that to Virginia and start my own company.
You developed a passion for pest control. Some people may call you crazy for that. How did you decide that you loved pest control?
There was actually one particular day we were on a really bad job, roaches everywhere. I mean, you couldn't see the color of the walls, couldn't see the color of the carpet, and this was a really intense job. There was an elderly couple living there, and when we actually eradicated the roaches out of that apartment, my boss at the time took us back to kind of double check things. And just the woman's face and her children's face, just looking at what we did to provide them with a better quality of life, that was something that really kind of tickled my heart. That's when Michael Jordan shoots that game-winning shot and he high-fives everybody. That's the feeling I had that day.
You have a very interesting entrepreneurial story of some tough times to get through some stuff.
As you mentioned, I did go through some tough times involved in a previous marriage, and that didn't work out, and that actually left me homeless for about 6 to 8 months. And during that process, I was actually still in business. And I had to make a conscious decision of whether I was going to give up and just go back to working a full-time job, or whether I was going to stick it out and fight it through. And I decided to fight it through. One thing that kept me going was relationships with family and friends, but also rewarding myself for every customer I got. I celebrated every victory, no matter how small it was.
So let me make sure I heard that right. So you kept your business open for 6 to 8 months, but were homeless.
Absolutely. Actually, I was technically homeless, but I did live in my office, which was at that time about 6 by 6 wide. And I slept on the floor, air mattress. But I worked this business, you know, sun up to sundown. And I was determined that I had such a passion for the company. I had something that I knew worked and was providing a legitimate service to our community. So I stuck in there and just basically gave it everything I had.
Over the last few weeks, we've talked about how entrepreneurs need to relax more, but you couldn't relax because you needed to get out of the situation that you're in so that you could get a home, that you could grow the business. How did you give yourself time away from the business, and how do you do it now so that you can celebrate those wins and make sure that you're not 100% 24/7 on the business, but you can get away and do something else as well?
And I've certainly been guilty of that. I've been guilty of work without any play. And you can certainly get burnt out that way. At that particular time, as you mentioned, I had to get out of my situation. So there wasn't time for play, there wasn't time for enjoyment. It was actually almost to the point where some of the tenants started to get an idea that I was living in the building. So I had to make sure that I made my situation better so I can get out of the building and, like you said, get into a home of my own.
I'm sure you had goals during that time, saying, and the main goal is probably, I need to get out of this office and get my own home. What did you do? Did you set a checklist, or how did you get out so that you could get a new home?
Well, I have a lot of mentors in business, and one of my mentors always taught me to work backwards from your goal. So you have your ultimate goal of where you want to be, you work it back into small bite-sized steps, and then you celebrate each of those steps. So as I would accomplish one small goal leading to that bigger picture, I would maybe take myself out to dinner. I would maybe celebrate in some fashion. Once I actually got to that point where I was able to, we were getting customers left and right, and we were growing beyond that office. And I got out of the apartment into a home, actually living like a normal human being once again. At that point in time, I did decide to really celebrate. And what I started to do at that point is every 3 months take myself on vacation.
Last question. If someone was on the fence about closing down their business because times are getting tough, what would you tell them to do? Or what kind of guidance would you give them so that they could keep the business open?
Well, the only thing I would say is the only way to truly fail is to quit. As long as you stuck it out, you know, it may take you a little bit longer than you originally anticipated, but at some point you're going to start to receive success. Most of the other major corporations today were not overnight successes. All of them were a culmination of time, of developing time and sweat and hard work, and that's when the success comes. Everyone hears about the great company 10 years later. They don't hear about the aches and pains as it takes to get there.
That's it.
All right.
Good job.
Appreciate it.
That's all for this week's Hampton Roads Business Weekly. You can find the show on Facebook and Twitter at HR Business Weekly or at hrbusinessweekly.com.
For Hampton Roads Business Weekly, I'm Zach Miller.
And I'm Cheryl Tan. See you next week.
Hampton Roads Business Weekly, sponsored by Regent University and produced by ABC 13.